Okay, so we're live. Hello. Just going to see if anyone joins us. Oh, hello. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Etty. James Weber. How you doing, James? Wait a little bit longer to see how many if we can get a few more people to turn up. Hi, Nikki. Oh, great, guys. Thanks for the support. Can you hear me okay? Is the sound all good? Oh, fantastic. Okay. Oh, Richard. Hi, Rich. How you doing? Dom. Just getting these introductions out of the way. Hello, Simon. Nice to see you. Okay, James. Good. Thanks, James. There's a little bit of a delay, I think. Hi, Sam. Hope you're good, mate. A lot of ex-students on here, which is nice. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, I've got a few notes that I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk about how I wrote the book and how I got the deal with Michael VC Productions. Talk about a few of the chapters in the book and general filmmaking, working with students, that type of thing. Hi, Chris. Yeah, so for those that don't know me, I'm a director and director of photography. I live in Bristol, UK, and I shoot drama, TV, music videos, that kind of thing. Anything that I can get my hands on, really. But when I'm not shooting, I teach part-time. I started teaching about 10 years ago at a local television workshop, and I teach at various colleges and university, that kind of thing. I've worked a lot with students, and just over the years, I've just amassed lots of notes and experiences of what makes good student films, or working with students and attitudes and all that kind of stuff. And I used to have a blog where I used to write down a couple of my thoughts. And then about 2 years ago, I just decided to put all of it down in a book and just go from there, really. I didn't have a deal in place or anything like that. I just decided to write it on spec, and just because I wanted to write something. I hadn't written a book before, but it was just a new project to get sort of my teeth into and hopefully give something back. It was just something to give back to the students that I'd taught, or new students, really. So like I say, the book took about 2 years to write, and part of the book I wanted to do an interview section at the back where I would interview different people in the industry of various grades, and one of them I wanted to interview was to get the Hollywood perspective. And there's a film I really loved growing up called Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I contacted the writer and producer of that, a guy called Penn Densham. I contacted him over Facebook and just said, look, love your work, and I use Robin Hood in my teaching, and it's actually in the book as well under the directing chapter. And I said, would you be up for an interview? And he agreed immediately. He was very generous, very kind, and we had an interview talking to him about his work and my work and Robin Hood and all that kind of stuff. It was fantastic. And he called me from his house from LA, which was like 90 minutes, 2 hours, and all on his dime, which was very kind of him. But at the end of the call, he just said, what are your plans for the book? And I said, well, I've got no experience in publishing, so I might release it as a free ebook or self-publish. As an actor friend of mine that sells glue to publishers, and I thought, well, might be able to contact him, get a good deal on glue. But he said, look, you should get in touch with my publisher, because I've just written a book called Riding the Alligator, all about screenwriting, which I owned. And I'm going to put you in touch with him to see if he might be interested. And I didn't know Michael VC Productions at the time, or I didn't think I did, until I looked on my shelf and I realised that I had 8 of their books. They do stuff like Shot by Shot, Save the Cat, Cinematic Motion, The Writer's Journey, things like that. And I realised that I owned a lot of their work. So I wrote an email to the president of the company, Michael, and just said, look, Penn's passed on your details, would you be interested? And I sent off a few sample chapters, and then he rang one day and basically said, let's have a chat. And he was asking me various questions, and then about halfway through the phone call, he said to me, I need your bank details to give you the advance. And it was then I realised I had the deal, which was fantastic. He was very kind. So that's the origins of the book. And then it took about another year on top of that to work with a copy editor who was based out of New York, and that was just a lot of back and forth with him. A guy called Ross Plotkin, who was very kind, very generous. Obviously, I was being new to the publishing world, I didn't know how it worked, and he was very, sort of took me by the hand and said, look, we're going to do this, make some changes, I'll make some changes, and a lot of the text had to be converted so that the Americanisms, like trainers went to sneakers, mum went to mom, petrol went to gas, all that kind of stuff, which was quite good fun. And then that was about a year ago, and then the book's been released and it's hit Amazon this week. So I'm going to talk about the sort of the writing of it, the writing habits, because there's a few people since I've published the book have said, oh, I'd love to write a book. And it's one of those things where you go, well, why don't you? Why don't you just write it? So the secret I found was to create a habit. Create the habit of writing. So that means ring fencing time. Excuse me a minute. Ring fencing set times, and just master consistency of saying, right, 3 hours on Sunday night, Tuesday, Monday morning, I'm going to do writing, and that's it. And the trick is, and this is the big secret to doing anything, is to do it even when you're not in the mood, even when you're not feeling it. Because if you wait until that time, it's going to be whenever. You're going to have 2 or 3 weeks, even months before you're in the mood, and you have time when the kids aren't running around and you're not tired and all that kind of stuff. So there's no magic real formula. So I just started writing and making notes, and I would just sit down and just go, maybe a chapter on this, and maybe I could write about that, and I give a screenshot from that. So each time I would sit down at the computer to write, I would just work on that section or the next section or whatever. And even if I wasn't in the mood, and in my diary I'd already scheduled a couple of hours to write, I would just sit and maybe do typos and go, I'm just going to reread what I've written before. And before you know it, what happens is you end up writing. You end up going, I'm just going to add a sentence to the end of that, and then maybe add this and sentence, and then maybe a little bit there. Before you know it, you're off. And that might take 5 or 10 minutes, but you almost trick your brain into doing it. You trick your brain into writing, rather than go, do you know what, I'm not in the mood, or I started it and haven't had time to do it, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to come on to like excuses and things like that later, because it's a bit of a bugbear for me, because I used to hear a lot of that from students. Okay, so then after you've written all your notes and you've expanded it out, you end up with a chapter, and then you just go on to the next one, and it's literally brick by brick, bit by brick, and then eventually you go, oh my God, I've got this manuscript. It's taken a couple of years or a couple of months, but I've got it. But it's just one of those things about excuses that you have to be mindful of, that we all have our reasons why we can't do anything. We all have the kids, or you're late from work, or you've got this, and you hear it a lot, even on film sets, nothing to do with writing necessarily, where people say, yeah, but you don't understand, I've got this, or I've got these kids, or I've got that. And it's, I know a lot of successful people who juggle the kids, juggle the work, juggle the late hours, but you still find time to do it, because books and whatever projects they're not made by people that have loads of money, no kids, single or whatever. They do it in spite of all those things. So that's really the secret to it. It was fun. It was very fun to write. I really enjoyed just sitting down and just emptying everything that was in here just out onto paper, and hopefully just someday kind of thinking, well, someone might read this and they might get something from it, and that's what sort of took me through it, really. And I used to have a lot of experiences with students teaching during the day, or even when I was on film sets, and I would have something and I'd go, do you know what, that's going in the book. That response or that attitude or that approach. And I would just go home and make the note, and it'd end up in there, good and bad. And it was great because it would just feed into it, and it would be real life examples that would go through. So talking about the chapters, here's the copy of the book, by the way, available now. So we have the introduction, where I just kind of talk about my background and how I got started, that kind of thing, which you've kind of gone over, and talk about writing as well. So whether you're writing a short film or a feature film, whichever it might be, and just talking about characters and dialogue and things like that, and just stuff that, you know, I struggled with. I've written a few scripts, features and shorts, and I read back my old scripts and I shudder at the fact that other people have read that. And my stage descriptions weren't particularly very imaginative, and it was big blocks of text that I expected people to read, and until I understood how to write character feeling and their actions all sort of rolled into one. There's a lot of times when I would read the script and I would have those feelings, or I'd have those pictures in my head, and then obviously other people were reading it going, do you know what, I don't see that. And at the time, arrogantly, you kind of go, well, no, it's in there, it's just that you're not reading it right. And then when you read your old script, you go, do you know what, they were right. It is crap, you know. But you have to get all those bad scripts out of your system. So that's all in there in the writing chapter. I have a bit on producing, talking about call sheets, planning, that kind of thing. And I have got a section as well called Limiting the Variables, which which I've committed this in myself, and I see other filmmakers doing it, where basically they might make a short film where they got two people talking in a cafe or something like that. And then they go, do you know what we've got, that we're going to raise the funding for the feature. And the feature happens to be shot on 4K, lots of visual effects, night shoots, working with kids, lots of extras, snow falling, all this kind of stuff. And these are all variables, and they don't have experience of any of them. You're going to have the variables of weather, kit breaking down, and all that kind of stuff anyway. So you don't need to add to that mix by having things that you don't know. And over the years, what I've tried to do with my short films is hit each of those variables, and undoubtedly you've messed it up. You've shot at night and you haven't realized how long it takes, so you haven't got the shots you need, so the edit doesn't quite work, or you're working with kids, or you're working with special effects and you schedule, you know, X amount of time and it takes 3 times the length of that. And then you have the experience then in each of these areas. And I think sometimes filmmakers make the mistake of going, oh, I've got this little two-hander, or I've shot a few music videos, and then we're going to make this big horror feature film. And what you don't want to do is have your learning experience. You don't want to have that learning curve on that feature. You want to have got all that out of the way on the smaller projects. So when you do the feature where you've got other people's money at stake, then you do it right. What else? We've got lighting and camera. Camera chapter is pretty big. It's a little bit dry because it's a bit of kind of technical stuff going through color temperature and lenses and all that kind of stuff. But there's a nice section on cinematography where we, you know, talk about my experience of breaking rules and things like that, and also about how cinematography isn't just about creating beautiful images. And I think there's a lot of students that come out of college sort of having sunsets on their reel and lens flares and all that kind of stuff, where good cinematography is actually reflecting the script. And it's like, if the script is, if where the setting is quite dull and flat, you don't necessarily need, you know, sunlight streaking through the window trying to make it look beautiful, and you end up with a DP that's kind of shooting stuff for their show reel rather than what's required for the film. What else we got? Sound. Good section on sound where, you know, I've made a few mistakes where I've had the mic in the wrong socket back in the day, and I remember once I shot a whole scene on a setting called Mic Attenuate, which is a setting on the cameras where they have it at minus 20 decibels, and basically you would use that setting if you were filming like a live gig next to a speaker or something, and you wouldn't shoot dialogue with it unless you're me. and I did, and it's a nice lesson where then you have to go into ADR and re-record the dialogue. So it was a mistake, but ended up giving you a nice lesson on the back end, and now you know not only what mic attenuate means, but now you know how to work, ADR. So just also about the sound chapter, just about how to hold the boom, rustling, that kind of thing, and finding something on the horizon that you could rest your boom on, and all that kind of thing, and just which actor to be in front of, and all that kind of stuff. The directing chapter, we have the first part of the directing chapter is really about confidence, just about getting the preparation, so when you're on set, you're not flustering. And just doing your shot list and having an idea of how it's going to come together. A lot on coverage, about how to shoot. As a DP, I kind of work with a lot of directors sometimes where they're shooting what they want to see in the edit, and they think they can just take those shots and just stick them all together, which you can, but then it doesn't necessarily give you much leeway if you want to start changing things. So coverage is just that, about where to put the camera to cover each actor and each part of the scene that you need. You know how it's going to cut, but you're giving yourself handles. It's not, I say it's in the book, some people call it like dump truck directing, where you've just got a scene, you're just going to shoot everything from every angle and let the editor work it out. That's not what it is. You still have an idea of how it's going to come together, but you're just giving yourself that leeway in case you change your mind, really. Another thing in the book is about orientation, which is where you need to tell the audience what's going on and where they are. That's where I used the example from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where there's a scene at the end of that movie where Robin and a few of his guys are going to rescue some of their friends that are about to be hung by the sheriff of Nottingham in this castle. And Kevin Reynolds is the director of that movie, and him and the editor kind of had to construct the scene where we see where everybody is. And a lot of the time they would use the wide shots plus over the shoulders, and the over the shoulder shots looking over Costner's shoulder down into the square to see what's going on, which is basically his point of view, would only last for a fraction of a second, maybe more, but it just lets the audience know that's where he is in relation to everyone else. And this is sometimes really not really paid attention to, because the director on set knows where everybody is, and they film it what they think works, and then when they get to the edit they see that, so they're bringing 50% of the movie which is in their heads to the film, so they think it all makes sense. But then you play it to someone else and you go, well, I didn't know that he was over there, I thought he was down there, or she was up there. And it is really a skill to master, and sometimes when you see edits sort of objectively, and you can say to people that you need a shot of that, or you need an over the shoulder here, or you need his point of view or her point of view from here, a bit of foreground here to anchor where he or she is in relation to the hidden gun or whatever it might be. So we cover a lot of that. It's quite a big part. And also just little sort of directing tips, like giving characters something to do. So two people talking, one could be changing the ink in a printer, or fixing a car, or making dinner or something. And it just gives the actor something physical to do as they're talking. And what's good about that is that they can get frustrated with it if it's not working, or it's an action, it's something physical that they can be doing. So then if the other character says something that they disagree with, or they need to react to, they can stop that physical motion. And then that shows physically that there's a thought going on. So sometimes, rather than just having two people talk, have somebody doing something else, and it makes it a little bit more interesting, and it could be related. Maybe they're, packing away the washing up, and there's a big sharp knife that they put away, and then at the end of the movie when the villain breaks in, we know there's a knife there, and we've planted that in the audience's mind, which we didn't know was important, but it also made the scene interesting at the time. What else we got? Directing actors, that's a big one. So we talk about working with actors, using action verbs, about how to basically get the best from them and not use result direction. A result direction is when you're literally saying to an actor, talk louder, look over there, point, that kind of thing. And action verbs are a way of communicating what you want with an emotional core. So if, let's just say, I think there's an example in the book where a father wants to interrogate the daughter about where she's been because she comes home late. Now, interrogate would be a good word there because the verb has the connotations of like police interrogating someone. So the actor knows he's not particularly, or she's not going to be very nice at that point. There's strong eye contact, that kind of thing. But maybe if the actor's delivering that and it's too much, you could say as a director, maybe quiz her instead of interrogating. So quiz has the connotations of a pub quiz, where it's a little bit more of a, just a general question rather than an interrogation. It's those little tricks that either you can use as an actor if you're not very getting a lot from the director, or as a director talking to the actors. And I think a lot of directors talk too much to actors. If you give the actor credit, what they're doing, they've read the script, they know the scene, they know, all we basically got to say is, look, maybe stand there and see what you've got, and let's run the scene and see what happens. But a lot of directors feel that they're not doing their job unless they talk at the actor for minutes on end about what they've eaten and what they're feeling. And it's like, if you need to have that conversation about what motivation or what's driving the character at that point, then you're in trouble because you've probably hired a bad actor. So as a job as a director, you should be just looking at and nudging one way or the other, and just remind them maybe about where they are, in the scene, and that's about it. But if you have to do lengthy discussions, I think there's a good example. It's not in my book, but there's another Michael Vesey book called On Directing by John Badham, who's a good director, and I think he's got like a 10-second rule, where he said everything that you should say to an actor shouldn't last longer than 10 seconds. And when you think about it, it's right. If you have to have longer discussions than that, then the stuff that should have happened off set or in rehearsal or whatever. And I've been on sets where we've got a long corridor and you've got a shadow of a figure walking across the corridor. It's like like a spooky haunted house thing, and the director's talking to the actor at length about what they've eaten and remember this has happened, seen before, and all that kind of rubbish. I've edited myself there. That's not what I would really want to say. And we turn over, and the actor just, a little shadow walks across the end of the corridor, and you go, we've just wasted 15 minutes listening to the director talk to the actor, and it wasn't for anyone's benefit apart from the crew, really. So what else we got? Rehearsals. I think rehearsals are a good thing. I think that to run through the whole film and just so you get all that discussion out of the way, and not intellectual discussion either. I think intellectual chit-chat is a waste of time. And there's something that is in the book that I credit to another author, a guy called William Ball, who wrote a book called A Sense of Direction. And he says if you're ever talking to an actor and they're intellectualizing about what they think is going on in the scene, something that can't be filmed, you just turn to them and say, great, show me. And once they realize that they can't show you because it's all in their head, the conversation's over. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it puts an end to the discussion. Because a lot of actors want to talk and talk and talk about this and the other, and actually none of that might get onto the screen, And that's another thing about prep. If the actor's doing all the prep, great. If it turns out, if it comes onto the screen in one way, shape or form, whether that's in dialogue or physical movement, fantastic. If it doesn't, I think it's irrelevant. If it doesn't add anything. And there was actually a section that I cut for length, but I said if the production designer of a film was building a cell for a prison movie and they build cell 39, and then the production designer decides to build cells 1 to 38, even though it never appears on camera, it has no structural relevance to the scene it's cell 39, it's just there, the producer would fire him. So it's wasted, it's not seen, it's wasted effort. You want to put that time and effort onto the stuff that will be seen. So that's all covered in the directing actors section. Editing. Editing is probably one of my favourite parts of filmmaking. Where to start on that first edit, what's the first shot, that kind of thing. and you can get paralyzed by that. One of the little tips that I have in the book is that I like to start each scene on something tight. So it might be someone buttering bread, a key going in the lock, and then you cut to the close-up of the person doing that, and then you cut to the wide shot of that wherever they are. And what's good about that is that for those 3 or 4 seconds, the audience is thinking, well, where are we, what's going on, rather than having the wide shot at the top of the scene, and then everyone in the audience and everyone knows what's happening all the time. So just starting on something, it just makes the audience play catch up, which is a nice little touch. And then just kind of unsyncing audio and video, so we start to hear the audio of the following scene coming in before we see it, and it's just little tips and stuff like that. We also have a section at the end. Tea break, 1 minute. Thirsty work this. Transformers cut, by the way. That was a present, I think. Yeah, I have got a section called the 3 Secrets to Filmmaking, which I tell to students anytime I'm teaching. I'll probably end on the 3 secrets, and it's in the book. One of the secrets is practical, one is academic, and one's personal. So the first secret, and this really, it can be applied to filmmaking or it could be applied to any creative endeavor, really. But what the first thing is just to shoot as much as you can, all the time. Be as prolific as you can. So if someone's getting married, offer to shoot their wedding video, promo for your local, flower show. It could be a music video, short film. Just shoot. I mean, literally set a time now and say, look, it's the 4th of September. At the end of September, we're going to make a movie. It's going to be a 1-day shoot. I'm going to cast it and just get out there and shoot like some 5-6 minute movie and just do it. And the problem is not many people shoot. They're not prolific enough. And each of those movies, you're learning something. A couple of colleagues and friends of ours, we go out on weekends sometimes and we just shoot absolute trash. We just shoot rubbish, little, kind of quiz shows or talk shows or short film, anything jokey. And what you realise, even in those little, mess about films, which I learned, running around the woods when I was learning the trade kind of with friends, is you learn about light levels. You learn about how much you can push the ISO on a 5D, how to work that whip pan or anything. You pick up on these little things that then you can then put in your films. I mean, when I was younger, I used to just film my bedroom. I used to pan around. I was like 13, pan around all my videos. It was videos back then. Might film the cat, and the cat would be walking around, and I'd just get the camera down low and just be walking with her from the side, sort of down to the, in the front, and just getting those low angles. And it was just messing around, just learning the camera, and then cut to 25 years later, and the director says to me on a shoot, "Oh, can you get a low angle of this person's feet walking into the room?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got it, because I filmed my cat. I've got that down, and I know where the camera's going to see, and I don't have to have my eye at the eyepiece." So it's small things like that. The second secret is to read as much as you can. I was self-taught. I didn't go to university. I think the term is autodidact, where you just kind of read books and go out and do stuff. But so much of what you need to learn is all in books, whether it's cinematography, acting, whatever you're doing, it's there, and yet no one does it. And I speak to a lot of actors even, and I say, have you read Michael Caine's book, or have you read Directing Actors, have you read David Mamet's on directing film, and they haven't read it. And there's so much information there, and they think, well, I've gone to, drama school, done a few short films, and I'm brilliant. When actually, if you were to read Michael Caine's book, there's a lot of hints and tips in there. And, it's not all gold. Some of it, I've bought books, cinematography books, costing 20, 30 quid, and they are expensive because they have to have colour pages to show you the lights and the colour schemes. And 95, 96% of it, by the time I get to the book, I know. I know that stuff. But there might be 2 little bits in that book which are pure gold. I'm like, I didn't know that, and I didn't know that. And now I do, and I can apply that to my next thing. So that book, that 30 quid just paid for itself. So that's it's a really big thing of just reading as much as you can. And a lot of the students, when I say that at universities, they're like, "Oh, I can't afford that." And it's like, well, don't go out on the lash Friday and Saturday night. Just do it on the Saturday night. Stay in on the Friday and put that money onto a book and get it second hand. Get something off eBay with the cover ripped for 99p, whatever. As long as you get the book, And then you get the information. That's the main thing. Okay, the last secret is to get your shit together. And with students, this is really a big thing. What get your shit together means is basically everything that is to do with you. So that's timekeeping, hygiene, communication skills, emails, all that kind of stuff. And it all matters, timekeeping is a big thing. Students who have been late for shoots, communication and emails, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I get emails from students looking for work or work experience, and it says, "Dear Paul," or before we can get to that, sometimes it's "Dear Sir, Madam," and my email address is Paul at, so they haven't done a lot of the homework there. And it says, "I am a student at," and the I is a small I. And you go, okay, well, I don't know, attention to detail isn't quite there. They haven't spent much time on it, and it just goes straight in the bin. Timekeeping, as we say, hygiene is a big thing. Eating well. If you're going to spend 16 hours a day shooting, you need to eat well. And hygiene is, like I say, I've mentioned that before because I've been in a dark cellar before with a camera assistant that didn't wash, and it's the middle of July, and they're all huddled down there, and he stinks. And it's just like, where do you begin with that? And then he says, "Oh, I'm just going to nip out for a fag." And I'm like, okay, that's more to it. So stuff like that, you just really need to be on top of. Getting buses, getting late for college, dog ate my homework, printer ran out of ink, all that kind of stuff. But, it's the excuses, really. And the biggest excuse is always time. And time excuse is kind of 99.9, hi Kat, how you doing? The percent irrelevant. If you replace time with "it's not a priority," there's your real answer. And we're all guilty of this. I get sent scripts sometimes and they say, "Oh, can you look over my script?" And a week later they said, "Have you read it?" And I said, "No, I haven't had the time," when it's not a priority. And one of the things I have in the book is that I used to say to my students, if you were to go to bed half hour later and get up half hour earlier, I've just bought you 7 hours on the day. Now, what could you do with on the week? So what could you do with 7 hours in a week? You could read scripts, you could write those essays, you could edit that film. 7 hours is a big chunk of time. And it's just always that excuse. And it's funny, you see people on, they might say that to me in person, "Oh, I haven't had the time." And then you go on Facebook and they say, "Oh my God, I've just blitzed Game of Thrones or House of Cards, all 12 episodes done." And you go, well, there's your time. And then you realize that on their priority list of sleeping, eating, Game of Thrones, going out with your friends, lying in on a Sunday, around 5 or 6 is writing that script and preparing my movie. And if it's down there, then you're in trouble, because that reflects your philosophy. And I always remember I had a producer on a film 10 years ago who went by the name of Anna Marshall, who was brilliant. And I remember once we had an issue sending out the call sheets, and I think she went to bed at like 12, and the next day the call sheets were there, and she said, "Yeah, I went to bed half hour later to get it done." And I always remember that, because the job that got done, whatever needed to be done, got done, rather than going, "Well, I stayed up late, I didn't get to bed till 12," and giving excuses. And one of the things I say to my students is, well, if they said I hadn't got time, if I said to you, if I was to pay you £50,000 to write that script in 2 weeks' time, you're telling me you couldn't do it, you haven't got the time. Or if a family member's life depended on it, you haven't got the time. And they would say, well, of course not. I would get up earlier, I would do this, I would move that around to make sure that I could do it. And it's like, well, there's your answer, you need to do that. Simple as that. So that's kind of like the 3 secrets. And then the final chapter is called Final Thoughts, where I just talk about what you need to do, kind of getting over fear and self-doubt, which everyone has, and just how in the early days you need to shoot as much as possible, because most filmmakers, they copy what they see on film. I did, I'd see John Woo movies and Spielberg movies, Ridley Scott and all that kind of stuff, and I would go, I'm going to put that shot in my film, and it doesn't work cut and pasted from that film into this film because the shot doesn't reflect the emotion of the scene or whatever. But you start by copying other people, and then you add your little touch to it, and then you tweak it and finesse it, and then eventually there's nothing left of the thing that you copied, and it's just you. And you need to get to that place as quick as you can, and you do that by shooting as much as you can, which is the first secret. So that's kind of the final thoughts. That's the kind of the wrap up. So moving on to student films, I've seen a lot of student films, and obviously as a student before I used to shoot them. And there's kind of things that, mistakes and things that could be improved. And there's like you spot the patterns of what's happening across them. And the first thing is a lot of the time they're too big. They're too ambitious, and I used to make that. Still do. There's nothing wrong with ambition, but you kind of have to look at your resources and say, I remember reading a script about 15 years ago where it said 4 police cars come to a screeching halt outside the burning house at night, and I was like, right, hey, good script, but how are you going to shoot that? Just because they've seen it in their heads, what you're talking about, getting the police cars, closing off the street, shooting at night. Set a house on fire, dealing with the police, it's big, it's too much, you can't do it. So you have to look at your resources around you and go, what do I know, what can I work into my script? So maybe your parents own a flower shop, and on Sundays they're closed, so you go, do you know what, I'm going to make a movie about a girl in a flower shop, and you shoot that, and you could shoot it in one day, you could shoot it over a series of weekends. You just go out and do it, like literally now. Go out and shoot that, write that script, cast it, and you just have to be as resourceful as possible. There was a guy I used to know about 20 years ago. He wanted to make a film. He was in Bath, near Bristol, and he basically said, I didn't know anything about making films, I didn't have any kit, but he looked up the Yellow Pages. Back in the day before Google, he got the Yellow Pages out and looked up Bath Film and Video Society and just said, I want to make films, can you come and help me? And he said, yeah. And it was brilliant because he just went, I don't know anyone, but, I'll appeal to strangers. And in today's day and age where you've got your iPhones, you've got 5Ds, you've got kit from universities or whatever, you can make anything. And it's just about going ahead and doing that. And the students I know, I won't mention, who say, yeah, I'm still working on the script, I don't quite know how I'm going to get that down. And that was last Christmas. And it's like, guys, you should have shot that thing already. So, just look at what's around you and what you can do. Other things about student films, just to kind of raise the standards, really. You see stuff where shots are overexposed. The pan is jerky. I saw something the other day where the opening shot was out of focus. And it's like, did the camera operator have his eyes closed? Did you have a second take? Why can it be technically good? We all watch TV shows, we all watch movies, we know what is quality, we know what's nice, headspace wise, you kind of, people are framed like this when they should be like that or whatever, or it's like this, and it's like, come on. So you have to those kind of things, and it's the small things that make the big difference. And then once you've got that technical stuff out the way, you can then concentrate on the story and the performance and all that kind of thing. You're not saying, well, hang on, I don't know where he is in relation to her, and the orientation's all off, and when we cut to her with the crying scene, the light was on her face, it was too overexposed, and we cut to him, he was out of focus, and it was like, what is this, so those things, it's just to raise your standards to make them as good as you can. And when I was at college, my friend and I used to have this thing, we used to call it the cake analogy, where whether you're making the cake or eating it. So if you're making the cake, you don't suddenly have this cake. You have to get all the ingredients together, and you have to work on each one, and then you have to, stir it up, and then you have to put it in the oven. You have to be patient while it bakes, and then it comes out. Everyone else watching it will go, "Oh my God, how did you do that? How did you make that?" Are we still there? Well, actually, yeah, we still good, guys? Someone give me a like. My connection just went there. Are we still on? Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah, so the cake analogy, then basically you end up with this cake, and it's complete. but other people will look at it and go, well, how did you do that? And it's the same with eating the cake. If you're going to eat a cake, you don't stick the whole thing in your mouth and you're going to dribble it everywhere. You cut it up into slices, and it's the same way you would write a script or a book or anything like that. You would just slice it up. But for those starting that journey, they say, I'm never going to do that. That's massive. I'm never going to finish that movie. I'm never going to do that. And it's just like building a wall. You just lay brick after brick after brick, and then you have the wall. So that's the way you need to look at it. And I think sometimes students and people, not necessarily students, everyone, they kind of have that fear and they look at the bottom of the mountain and go, I'm never going to do that. And then psychology kicks in then, so you have to question, those kinds of attitudes. So, speaking of attitudes, student attitudes would vary, those that do the work and those that don't, that do the extra stuff. But there is something that I'm just going to finish up before there's any questions. Some students are really into doing the work and putting themselves out there, and some aren't. And I remember I went to give a talk at a college in Bristol once, and a girl came up to me at the end, a girl called George. I hope you're watching, George. And she said, can I come on a shoot? And I was like, yeah, no problem. So she came on a few shoots with us. And after that, she got some good at work experience on a few TV shows. And then she went off, and I think she was like 17, 18. She went on to Countryfile, and then she went on to EastEnders. It was fantastic. So then I went to university to give another talk, different university. I told that story. Now I'm saying, out of this class of 50 that I'm talking to, how many should, in theory, come up to me at the end and go, well, actually, you told that story about that girl getting experience and now she's working on a big TV show. That might happen to me. So how many of you should come up to me at the end? Now I have a class of 50, that should be 50. But what happened is I had 2 come up. And out of that 2, one of them came on a shoot. And when we were on this shoot, she found out about the director who had a premiere that was happening. So we went, and she went to the premiere, and she had to go back to uni before coming back to the premiere. So it was all on her expense. And then and went out for dinner, and she ended up sitting next to someone that was looking for a production designer, and she ended up going on that shoot. Story's not over. Cut to my next university trip. Well, I tell both of those stories. Okay, there's a pattern forming here. And then I got a class of 50 or 40 or whatever it might be. I'm giving the talk, and I tell that story, and I'm saying how the mind boggles why I don't get more people. So out of a class of 50, how many should come up? And the last time I told this story, 10 turned up. Out of 50, I think it was out of 30 actually. So 10 people turned up, and 10 people took my email address wanting work. And out of that 10, only 1 emailed. So 1 person came on the next shoot. In my head, I've ceased trying to understand why that happens. You can't explain it. Hopefully, if there's any students watching, you're not like that. But it's the equivalent in my eyes of me saying, come to my house on Saturday morning, I'll give you the winning lottery numbers, and you don't show. I just don't understand why, whether it's fear of coming up, whether you've forgotten about coming up, or whether you just can't be asked. And either, all of them need to be looked at. But if you're at university paying $9,000 a year and you can't be bothered to go up and speak to someone at the end of the lecture and get any details or anything like that, especially once they've said that you can need to consider quitting uni and going, well, do you know what, this isn't for me, because the industry demands that you put in that effort and put in that extra time. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. I don't think there's any questions that's popped up, but if there is, shoot. I can also announce that I've got a second book deal with Michael VC Productions, which is great. It's going to come out in 2019. It's called Making Your First Blockbuster, and it's going to be all about action, special effects, that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to writing that. And I just need to thank Michael VC Productions, Ken Lee, Ross Plotkin, all 3 of you guys have been really grateful and helpful in shepherding me through this process. And then my personal proofreaders, Simon Pearce and Will Griffin, Neil Oseman and Mark Cadwell, so a couple of DPs that were kind enough to look over and just sort of fact-checked a few things. But yeah, so if there's any questions, happy to take them. and go buy the book on Amazon right now. Good bookshops, movies, 19.99. Or if you're in the Bristol area, come to our book launch this Friday at the Watershed. Yeah, you can get it for a reduced price. And we're going to have a bit of a meeting with professionals and students in the area, kind of a networking event. So, maybe, Oh, got a question here. Who's the better actor? Simon Pengelly or Oliver Park? Oh, tough one. That is really tough, Si. Oh, I think the connection... I just replied then, Si, but I think the connection went... Maybe it didn't come across. We also made, while we're still on, just going to thank a couple of people actually. Alicia Ainsel, who modelled for the book. Andrew Lamb did a lot of storyboards. Oh, another question. More insightful comments or stories always. Just thanks. Thanks, man. See, that's a good comment there from ex-student Ben, who was on the MA at Bristol, and Ben was one of the good ones. He would do extra the work, do the scripts, and he made a film. Got a nice job at Films at 59. Then he's moved on to Aardman, and he's just fantastic. So, go Ben. Hi, Beth. Nice to see you. Who else? I was in the middle of thanking. Alex Hudd, can thank you, dudes. Sound recordist. Oh, just maybe a little bit on the end here. I've got some common traits. There's a chapter called Common Traits on Student Films. Kind of the things that I used to do that kind of like the big red flags. So I think one of the ones in here is like getting hung up on gear. Resolution and stuff. I speak to a lot of students where they're kind of the first thing, and they're not talking about story or where they're going to shoot. It's like we're on 4K and we're on the red. It's like, well done, but if you don't know where to put the camera, it's all moot. So don't get hung up on that. Directors trying to be new and different with strange and obscure camera angles. I used to do this where my friend Will and I, we used to shoot. We had a camera angle once inside of a baked bean can. We thought it was really creative because we'd take the lid off a baked bean can, take the bottom off, obviously empty the beans, and then stick the camera on the inside and then kind of put the lid back on and then pretend to unscrew the lid, and it looked like the camera was inside the baked bean can. Why? We thought it was funny, but you still shoot shots sometimes like that now, and it's just a bit, you kind of need to get that stuff out of your system, really. It's sometimes the best place for the camera is eye level, right in front of the actors, not spinning around from the ceiling and whooshing and all that kind of stuff. Projects that are too ambitious, been there. Like I say, a lot of these are mistakes that I made. No depth to your shots. Hi, Nikki, you talk about 3 seconds in your book. What are the 3 things people should avoid doing in the industry? P.S. Something like 3 things you should avoid doing in the industry. Well, I don't know off the top of my head. Turning up late on sets, being courteous and polite. So many people aren't courteous and polite, and it's just crazy. And as a makeup artist, Nikki, this has nothing to do with you. I haven't worked with you for a while, but look at the monitor. The amount of shoots I've been on recently where the makeup artist doesn't look at the monitor and production's waiting because we've been told the actors are in makeup when the actor has their back to the camera or they're not even on camera. But the makeup artist thinks because the actor's on set they need to be made up. So stuff like that, the mind boggles really. Thanks, John McGuire. I missed the first 40 minutes. I was looking at a few locations. Yeah, Si, I'm going to post this whole thing and get posted to the timeline. Gary, great advice. Looking forward to hearing more on Friday. Thank you. Where was I? Okay, the common traits. Yeah, no depth. So they would have a shot where it's like this, pretty much up against the white wall, rather than staging it where we can see a door or down the corridor or something like that. And there's actually a couple of diagrams in the book where we see it down the corridor rather than just kind of shooting across it and stuff like that. So that's a big thing. Overexposed shots, too many edits or insert shots. Sometimes it's like if someone gets up in the morning and they lean over to get their glasses, I've seen student films where they have a close-up of the glasses being picked up, which we don't need because the person's leaned over, grabbed something, and we know what they are by the time the hand comes back in. We don't need to the insert. But what it does is you've got an edit there, and if the pace of the scene is supposed to be quite long and slow, you've just sped it up a little bit by having a cut that you didn't need. And the camera person or the director on the set was like, oh, let's get a shot of that, let's get a shot of that, and it's actually, we don't need it. So it's things like that, having too many edits. Poor audio is a classic. Wind rustling on the soundtrack, off mic, all that kind of stuff. It's funny because audiences will put up with a bad picture if the picture goes black or it's not particularly well framed or whatever. But if the sound goes, it's, you know, they actually turn around and they think something's wrong with the film. Or having the last one, having long meandering edits to suggest meaning. You know, I think Kubrick got away with it but you know, nobody cares. It's just boring. You know, just because you have 15, I don't know, a minute of a sunset or some kind of stuff like that, wind blowing through the trees. It doesn't tell us anything. You know, I've seen stuff like that on YouTube, and my attention span's like no. So that meaning's in your head. The audience don't care. So that kind of thing. But there's more of those in the back of the book. So yeah. Bits on lighting and kit, depth of field, and perceptions of a producer, being bullish and coming down hard on people because you think you've got some kind of power when you just don't need to do that. You know, it doesn't get the best out of people. Yeah, okay. Right, any other questions there? What's your favourite sandwich? Thanks, Gareth. Chicken is the answer to that. Michael Morris. What do you think of crowdfunding? Do you believe... Sorry, guys, this is on my phone. Let me just see if I can get this. What do you think of crowdfunding? Do you believe it works, or is it more advisable to stick to smaller, realistic budget and try and self-fund? Yeah, good question. I'm just going to repeat that because I read it a bit just on TV. What do you think of crowdfunding? Do you believe it works, or is it more advisable to stick to a smaller, realistic budget and try and self-fund? I mean, yeah, run a crowdfunding campaign if you can, and if it works, great. But a lot of the things that I've done, I've self-funded in the early days just because I needed it done. And sometimes there's like a window of enthusiasm for a project that, you know, by the time you apply for funding from this grant or that place, and there's a 6-month waiting list, and then you have to jump through this hoop, you could have shot 2 or 3 films. So it depends on what you're doing. Self-funding, you're in the complete control. Crowdfunding, I've done one crowdfunding campaign, and it really did help. But it depends how big the budget is, really. I mean, if you could shoot something and it's like a drama or something, and you can get it done, or if you've got access to the costumes to make something work, if you're doing a period thing, all that kind of stuff, fine. If your auntie owns a big mansion house, brilliant. But the small things, they do add up. As soon as you start bringing in effects and stuff, which is going back to the limit in the variables thing, as soon as you have these things, and there's 3 scenes at night, and there's a small kid in the scene, and there's a special effects where the car blows up and stuff, that's going to get, the budget's going to get high, so you might not be able to self-fund that, unless you want to put it on your credit card like some of the old timers did, like Kevin Smith and Rodriguez and all those kind of guys. But yeah, give it a go, Mike, if you can. Hi, Sarah. Nice. Oh, yes, Nicky, I will sign your book. Thanks, Mark Jackson. Nice to see you. Antonio's coming in. No, okay. Well, guys, I'll wrap it up then. It's been an hour. Thanks for watching. It's been fun, and apologies if my Facebook feed has been nothing but the book recently, but obviously I've had to push it, and I'll change it to something else. Yeah, you'll have a year's absence before the next book comes along. But I appreciate you all tuning in and the support and the questions, and for those of you that have sort of support me personally and sent me messages and bought the book, much appreciated. Oh, thanks, Mike. No worries. So yeah, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you found it informative, and I'll see you on the next one.